All right, so today is ECU day. We are going to turn the key on this thing and it is going to run, probably. First, we've got to set up some stuff in the ECU, so let's take a look at how you can set up your own EFI system at home.
Is that a FuelTech I see running?
We'll be running in about 2 seconds. Very quick to change maps on these ECUs, which is very good. Want to make a change in the pits quickly, click a few buttons and away you go. So currently we're ready to turn key on this thing now. I haven't got fuel injection system set up, so it's controlled by the FuelTech. So just like if you happen to have a carburetor and you were completely paranoid about switching to EFI, you can still run a FuelTech. So the ECU and the dash will still control all the ignition. Maybe you've got even a blow-through turbo set up. You can still do a closed loop, control the ignition. It can do your nitrous controls and things like that, boost control, all your timing controls. There's no fuel injected, so it won't control the fuel injection. So this is very, very easy to set up as well. So if you want to convert your V8 engine like this, say Cleveland, it's pretty easy to set up. So we've just selected here the engine type, so it's just 351. It's the firing order, number of cylinders, max RPM. Don't worry about that too much because I don't rev an 8,000 RPM, that's for sure. The next one is no, not anytime soon.
So how many LPG equipped cars do you reckon are running a FuelTech in the world? This could be the world's quickest FuelTech on straight gas.
This could be Rob Dahm spec, where everything's just the world's first LPG, IMPCO, Cleveland powered F350 tow truck. So
now, why are we still in LPG?
It's just easy. I want to get this thing on the road and registered.
We're doing all the maintenance of the car.
So
truck first.
We're doing all the brakes and all the stuff. I just want to get it to the point where it's roadworthy, and then I've got a roadworthy certificate. So I want to get it on the road, so then I can drive it to the engineers. So when I do the turbo and the fuel injection, it's already still registered, so to speak, so I can drive it to and from. Where if it's not registered, it makes it much more difficult, and I've got to pay for a permit every time I do it. So just easy to do it that way. So converting a carbureted engine to EFI or to run via the FuelTech is very, very easy. So I've just got a basic magnetic pickup distributor that has 8 teeth on it, and a 2-wire magnetic sensor. So all I did was come in here to RPM signal, set it to crank trigger, which is 4 at the crank or 8 at the cam. The reason it's that is because the crank turns at half the speed or double speed at the cam. So for every revolution of the camshaft, there's extra-ons of the crank. So what we'll have here is then you'll see here cranking this position at 20. So what I've done is I've moved the balancer to the timing marker 20 degrees, and then I've stabbed the distributor exactly spot on where that magnetic pickup is, and then we're right to go essentially. So then that gives us scope, either a fair range either side of that to advance or retard ignition. You don't set this to 0 and then stab it at 0. You won't have enough range when you're trying to when the computer's trying to control it. So that's pretty much how basic this is. So if we move into the engine bay, I can show you some of the other stuff I've got set up here. Of course, tow trucks, so we've got decent radiator. This is a Mishimoto one. Unbelievable but true. Yes, they do a bolt-in aftermarket aluminium massive radiator for one of these, which is killer, because I thought that was going to be pretty hard to sort out. So some of the other stuff you'll need when converting to an ECU is there's a magnetic distributor. So if I just pop the cap off of that, and I'll show you what I mean by just magnetic. You might see other distributors where they have a big box on the side or whatever, where that is. You'll see here there's just a sensor here, a magnetic pickup, and there's 8 teeth around here, which is just a steel wheel. And every time that turns, that basically gives the ECU a signal of this is when I'm at a next cylinder. This is when I'm at next cylinder. So it's telling it a spark event, and this is just your standard rotor. The rotor fires off here, spark travels from here, travels down here, and then travels out to there. and then you've got your spark plug leads, which, I mean, this is then just becomes a normal distributor, like in any engine that still runs a distributor, where the spark comes in here and it gets distributed to all these leads, and these leads go to 1 to 8 cylinders. Where it is slightly different is that the FuelTech controls when to fire the spark, and this is an LS3 coil pack with an inbuilt igniter, so I don't have to worry about external igniters or anything. Everything's inbuilt. FuelTech triggers this. It tells it when to fire based on the ignition advance or retard in the ECU. We've got sensors such as intake air temp sensor right here, which isn't fitted to anything at the moment, but it doesn't matter. Here we've got the engine coolant sensor, and I've also got up on the firewall over there an oil pressure sensor, and they're just basic sensors that tell the ECU what's going on, as well as manifold pressure. And I don't have a throttle position sensor here that's hooked up at the moment, but that's not overly vital either.
Hey, what happened to all that marvellous wiring that was in the engine bay?
It still looks a bit messy actually, because I've just dumped it in, but most of that wiring is on the ground here, and there's a little bit of it here still, but most of that I removed from the car and then put in the bin because it was terrible. So if you look up under the guard here, I've actually hidden a bit of it for like the lights, the front headlights and the reverse tail lights and stuff like that, just because I don't want to look at them. So everything's just hanging and hasn't been put in place yet, because when you remove stuff from a car and when you're in the middle of getting things running, number one thing you should never do is cable tie or tie stuff off or bolt stuff down in the final resting place, because if you do need to fault find or check things, you're going to have to undo all that again and trace things and that. So it's easy just to leave it in a bit of a mess like this is at the moment, you can see, because once I know that it runs and everything's fine, that's great. That can move on and then tie everything away. But it's just no use making it look neat before you know that it actually works first. So last thing that's pretty tricky is obviously LPG car. They normally have these big ugly boxes that get a negative signal from the coil firing, and that tells the lock off to, it's like a timed lock off. It times it for a few seconds to turn on, and then it won't turn back on and stay on unless the engine's running. Obviously you can't get the signal because that's inbuilt igniter, and I can't get the signal out of that to run that, but it's also another box and it's big and ugly. It's another failure point. So all I've done is, again, I have the FuelTech fuel pump relay running this. So the fuel pump relay and the FuelTech, you can control on how long you want it to turn on initially without, so would normally with fuel injection would prime the fuel pump to build fuel pressure. So then you can start the engine because the fuel injectors need pressure in the rail to fire. Here I need to prime the gas system in a similar way. So the fuel injection relay clicks on, but what it does, the wire comes here, turns this gas solenoid on. It also turns a gas solenoid on the tank. So gas flows through here as a liquid, a high pressure liquid. In here, it's then converted to a gas, and then the gas is brought through via vacuum in the system. So that's pretty much how this system works. And the FuelTech controls it all really, really easily. So if you've got a carbureted engine and, some people not only are hesitant to go fuel injection, they love carburetors, which is fine. If you want that really clean look of a carburetor, whatever, you don't want to, you've got a manifold like this one, you don't want to weld rails to, you can still run a computer like a FuelTech, and it will control everything like I just said. So don't be afraid that if you think because you got a carburetor you're locked out of a system like this. You can have a great system where you don't have to also mess up your dash or your cowl here with all the gauges and that. You can have a nice clean dashboard that will do your speed, and show all your stuff like water temp, oil temp and that, and have safety modes built in to protect the engine, which are really important too. So just say this engine drops oil pressure, the ECU can shut it down, shut the engine down completely, or even just lower the RPM and bring up alerts on the screen, which is really important too, because something normally when you're just running carburetor and old school Dizzy, you don't have that kind of software built into a carburetor. So I think this thing's pretty much ready to fire now. So another thing when I'm getting cars running that I always set up is a jerry-rigged push-button starter. And the reason I do that is just so I can stand here and I can see something. So I can see if something's caught in, if a wire gets caught in this belt for some reason, or if something happens to leak outside an engine base, every time I'm starting a car,
you can see the rods landing on the ground.
so I can see the engine kick back or backfire or whatever. Whereas if I'm sitting in there,
true.
And you're turning the key, if this was on EFI or whatever, you can't see fuel pouring out the rails. You go to turn the key and poof, you've got a fire or whatever. So whenever I'm starting new setups, I always have this setup. Just makes it so much easier. So some of the wiring still to be sorted out. I'll just show you at the moment. So I've just got this set up. So this is just a normal, a little switch.
FuelTech over here.
Yep. So I'll turn it on now, and you can see now it's just turning on. You see the wideband, which I've also got temporarily connected to, just going through the settings and whatnot. And now I can just go to the engine bay and fire it up. You can see there it's saying it's got an O2 closed loop limit because I haven't done the settings in here for closed loop, but it's obviously got the settings in here to affect the closed loop, but that's an EFI thing. So that would be then altering the amount of fuel being injected in the engine. Here we've got the gas system, so it can't change the tune-up in terms of air-fuel ratio because it's being run and managed by the LPG system. So, but again, it's another smart thing on the thing that's telling you basically your tune-up's crap. So, which you can probably smell because it stinks. So, engine's running away. It hasn't got any water in it yet, so I'll pull the pin. But yeah, I mean, as you can see, it runs. We can see by the wideband that it runs filthy rich too. I mean, I think there was like 11.5 to 1 at idle.
Engine bay's looking a lot better than it was, eh?
Yeah, it's amazing what
Forget how bad it was.
It's amazing what and it's still, I mean, it still looks like a bit of a mess because of all these wires. So yeah. The next part is it's still got this big, ugly cast iron water pump on it. So while it's still in the gas system, I'm going to leave that on there because once the gas goes, then these hoses go as well. So I'll be able to, take this off.
They take up a bit of real estate, don't they?
Yeah, so I'll take this off and I'll make a big adapter and put the Davies Craig electric water pump on there. And that's that Davies Craig water pump, then the FuelTech will completely control that by PWM, so it'll be able to just pulse the pump very easily at low temperatures, so it's not just constantly on. Low temperatures it pulses it, and then when it gets to a certain temperature, whatever when it's set up, it's on completely. We've got the fan on there already, so most of the wiring's pretty much done. Now I know that it runs, I can tidy up all this. I need some T-pieces for that, and then the rest is just engine mechanical.
All the wheels and tyres are off because we're currently
it's this stuff. Yeah,
sorting out a solution for that.
Everyone would have seen how great the tyres were when we picked it up, and it's a miracle we made it back alive, to be honest. But we're going to sort out a solution for that at the moment. Then I've got brakes, so I've got those to sort out there. I've got the drums to sort out. But besides that, it's just maintenance things to get it back. So the mechanical side and all the wiring for the electrical side is probably the most
time consuming.
And the daunting stuff of what the hell is this? So I found on one of the Facebook groups for F Trucks Australia or something, I think it was called, and those guys had wiring diagrams and service manual, I think, for this in one of the little tabs. It's got files, so I downloaded that, and thank God that the wiring diagram is, the colors on the wires aren't all exactly the same, but it's the same panel, and I've traced it back and it all makes sense. So that's like a brilliant resource, because without that, it's, testing wires of continuity with the multimeter is great, but there's so many wires in here that are just different colors and running everywhere, and I would have had to remove the tape off every wire and stuff like that, and that's just a pain in the ass. It just takes so long. So this is pretty much where this one's at now. The next step is servicing this, and the biggest thing will probably be, what where is it? Did I get them out before? Oh no, they're down here. So the biggest thing to move on with it now is probably these airbags. So I've got to fit these bad boys in here. So what happens is it's got a couple of these plates. One plate bolts on here, and the other plate bolts onto here. And then these sit here in between those two plates. And you fill these bags with air, and it helps level the load and take a bit extra weight off the spring. So you can see here there's a couple of saddles. There's an extra spring that used to run through over the top here called the helper spring, and they've obviously been removed to... It would have been a much stiffer ride with those springs. So someone's taken them off to soften up the ride in it a little bit, but it's now harmed the load, I guess, capacity of that. So these airbags will go in that space, and we can pump these up, and it'll just help, you know, when the car's on it, it'll just help carry that load a lot better. So when the car's not on it, but compressed air goes in here, and all I do is let the compressed air out, and then it just goes back to riding as it is now on the spring. Yeah. So I'm not going to say I did, but theoretically, I may have given this a bit of a test on while I was on a permit with a load on here, and didn't exactly go to plan. So it was the bed, I want to do a fair bit more structural work on the bed and that, but the bed leant over a fair way. So the airbags would have completely stopped that. It would have been able to hold up the load well, whereas when I had this load on here, it really tipped the bed over on one side significantly. So definitely need to get those in. Looking forward to it. So
all right, that's it for this installment.
Got to get back to working because I want to race that thing over there, and the only way to get that to the dyno or to a racetrack is by this thing running. So till then, you'll be finding me in the garage, and I'll leave you to next time. Getting back to some dash work, I've used a bit of a cardboard template here, and I think this is 2mm aluminium, something like that. So this is the normal, this is the dash as you look at it, and this is where I was going to mount the heater controls are up here, but my idea is I'll have some kind of CD player up here, CD player these days, but whatever it is, and I'll mount FuelTech right about here. So it was just easier and nicer and neater and stronger to mount that there. So I think that looks fine. It's definitely going to be in the path of vision, so that looks great. Now I'll either use Sikaflex or something, or glue this in place. Sikaflex is rock solid, so I mean you glued body panels and windscreens and stuff on with that, so I think gluing this on with that should be no dramas at all. It'll definitely keep, this is pretty light, and so would a wireless in there, so I think we should be fine. Basic setup like this can work just as well as some flashy PDM, especially in a car with this kind of budget. So you can see here, relays labelled, fuses labelled, so it's pretty easy to identify if there's a fault or if there's a problem. That's all that's set up, and now dash is back in the car, as well as the FuelTech and the standard dash as well. So you can see HVAC lines have been run now. There's one just behind here. There's split out to the feet. There's another one that comes out of that vent there, and then out of these two top vents here. And that. So I left this slot here open for fully sick sound system, bro. And here I might push that line in there and get something else in here. Now I've seen there's like single din cup holder things that come out, and this car's obviously, you know, from 1976 and no cup holder, so I might see if I can sneak something like that in there. Alright, so that's another episode down. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing if you're not a subscriber already, and also share this video on all your social platforms. That would really help us a lot, so thank you. Also, maybe check out some of our sponsors like Joel's Garage Gear. Got some awesome stuff there, so go and check them out on their website and Facebook page. Give them a like as well and a follow. Next week we're going to really start getting stuck in this car. It's truck, I should say, keep on making that mistake. It's really starting to see the light at the end of the tunnels, but the suspension, the brake system needs a massive overhaul, so we'll be doing that, and you'll see it all on another episode of Backyard Mechanics.
And like always, support the people who support us.